Strickland travels the country leading programs in prisons for governments and court systems. In Georgia, he partners with several schools to teach courses aimed at helping students make better choices. But Strickland isn't a teacher. In fact, he is a convicted felon who admits to selling drugs across the country, and it started when he was just 13 years of age.
This is what change looks like. When we come out here, we stand in front of our power. When we come out here, we demand justice. When we come out, we make them change laws so that we can't be shot in the street, so that our families got the same protection as every other family. That's what change looks like.
Hi, my name is Keith Strickland. I'm your host for the night, and I just want to thank you for tuning in to Change Agents for Social Justice. Tonight, I have an amazing panel. I'm so grateful for the time and for them just to be on. And tonight, what we're talking about is youth violence, the different needs that our youth have, and what's causing the violence for our youth, and some of the things that we need to be doing as a community and as adults to be able to help reduce this violence. A little bit about my background. I grew up in the streets myself. I started selling drugs when I was about 12 years old. By the time I was 16, I was already a convicted felon. I already been expelled out of school, went straight into the streets, started selling drugs even more heavy, and caused all kind of problems for my community. So I know firsthand how you can get pulled into the streets when you don't have resources, when you don't have a support system, and when you really don't have hope because you can't see your future. So I'm not saying that to make an excuse for people who are out here doing the wrong thing. I'm saying that to be proactive. If we want to be able to curb youth violence, if we want to be able to stop the murders, and we want to be able to make a safer community for our kids, we got to look at what our kids are going through, address it, and then create some solutions. So I want to introduce our panel for the night so we can get into the conversation. And as always, we're going to start with our queens. So Ms. Kenidee, if you would like to tell them a little bit about who you are and give a little bit on your background.
Great. Thank you for having me, actually. My name is Kenidee Barkley. I am a senior at Cristo Atlanta Jesuit High School. I'm the president of our Black Student Union. As far as my background, I went to public school, elementary and middle school, high school. My mom transitioned me to private school, for more opportunity, different arena of people, different caliber of people. As far as drugs and things like that, my dad has been in and out of jail because of drugs my entire life. My brothers as well. So I kind of know a little bit about that lifestyle, but since my mama put me in private school, I didn't necessarily have to deal with it firsthand. And I'm so grateful for that. But as far as my school, my community, and what I do there, I kind of take part in creating a safe space for Black people. So you don't necessarily have to be confined to the certain spaces that you see in your community and in your society. So I create the spaces where when you're going home and you have to deal with the drugs and everything that you're dealing with in the outside world, I try to create a space where it's kind of like a safe haven. So you don't necessarily have to deal with all of that when you come into our space. So in the Black Student Union meeting, it's more so about mental health. We're talking about a lot of things that kind of shed a positive light on what we have to go through as Black youth. Because I know things can they get really dense when you kind of are talking about the issues and the problems and everything that we have to face. So I just try to shed kind of like a positive light, be that one day out of the week where you don't have to think about the issues of the real world. I'm responsible for creating those spaces. So.
Well, first and foremost, I just want to say I'm proud of you.
Thank you.
Proud of you. I want to say how I met you. I met you while you were creating a program with a state representative and you were pushing that program. So I want to let people know that you're not just looking at a senior, you're not just looking at somebody who's doing work inside the school, you're looking at somebody who's a leader in her community at a young age, somebody who's representing for people, not just when you were doing that program, not just young Black people, but young people, period, not just people who have commonalities with you, but people from all different spectrums. So I just want to thank you for what you're doing and let you know I'm proud of you, and I look forward to hearing your thoughts and your concerns tonight. Next, Director Reys, I want to thank you for your time too, brother. And just introduce yourself, let people know who you are, let people know your background and what it is that you do for our youth.
Hey, I'm Director X. I'm a director. I make music videos and commercials, TV shows, movies. But my community organization is called Operation Prefrontal Cortex. And our mission is to reduce gun, mass, and police violence through meditation. And I'll get into the science behind all that as we speak today, but that's what I'm here to do, and that's what I'm here to talk about. So
Hey, do you mind talking about how you got into this? Some of your own experiences and what pushed you to be an advocate to reduce violence? Because I feel like your story is really, it speaks to your character. Like a lot of people could have went through what you went through and it could have, could have changed them in a negative way. But for you, it made you go out and save more lives.
Yeah, in 2015, I got shot in the back. A bullet went through two people and hit me at a party, my own party, for New Year's. So ever since then, I started to think about what causes people to lash out in a violent and aggressive way, and it got me into how the brain works and how you get there. Like I said, I'll get into the details of that later as we're doing introductions. But there's a science behind what we got going on and ways we can alleviate it.
Well, thank you, brother, for just this year. You won Music Video of the Year, right?
When nominated for Life is Good is nominated for a Grammy.
Okay, it's nominated, so they haven't made a selection. But for a person of your caliber, with all the different things you got going on, you could say you at the height of your career because you're doing your thing right now. But you still focus on the community. You still focus on other people, and you still use your reach to be able to make sure that you're generating opportunities for people who basically like somebody who was the person that shot you. And like I said, a lot of folks that could have went in a whole different direction. So I just appreciate you just caring about other people and just doing everything you can to make a space for people. All right, and last but not least, I want to introduce Ivan. Ivan's been on the show before, but Ivan is just a phenomenal dude. And again, he just has so much value to add that I just want to bring you back on.
Appreciate it, Keith. Ivan Gaskin, born in Atlanta, raised in the north end of Seattle. Currently came back down from school, attended Morehouse College, came out in 2016. And since then, have been really just a performer and an investor. So on one side of what it is that I do, heavily involved in real estate in West and Southwest, focused on providing affordable housing as well as creating communities and spaces where we can still come together and still hold on to something. As well as on the other side of things, what it is that I do. I'm a performer, a poet, storyteller, however it comes. So those are the two elements, where it is that we live and how it is that we think. Really just here to say that the word of the day is love, and you can go out from anywhere. Thanks for having me on the show.
No, thank you so much, brother. Thank y'all for your time. So a little bit of my background on why youth violence is so important to me. Right now, I'm in my community center right here on Kempton Road. And like as most of y'all know, I hustled in this community. I used to sell drugs right across the street from where the center is now. My best friend, well, my female best friend when I was 14 years old, got shot and killed on my birthday on her way to school. Up the street, and I say up the street. I've been watching youth violence all my life, and I got my own child who passed when she was an infant. So, man, growing up in low-income communities, you just watch our youth go through so much. You watch people lose their life before they even had a chance to live life, right? And recently, we just had a series of youth deaths right here in Atlanta. We had a 7-year-old little girl who was shot while driving down the street with her family in Buckhead, shopping for Christmas. And we had a 16-year-old young lady who was shot by a 16-year-old young man inside of a hotel after they left a room at the hotel together. That happened on Christmas night. Right before that happened, I was eating at a restaurant, maybe a block away from where the shooting happened at the hotel. I saw the police go to the hotel. I'm on the board for the city of Atlanta to repurpose our police force. So whenever I see police involvement with Black people, I always kind of monitor it to just make sure that it goes smoothly, because you can't really fix a problem if you don't have your eyes on the problem, right? I had no idea this was a youth murder. I had no idea that another youth who was in a program that I had in a school had just shot another youth. And when I found out, man, it just tore me up, because our murder rate went from the low 90s to over 150 in Atlanta this year. And you hear nothing at all about it. If that young lady had not been killed in Buckhead, we might not even know her name, because if she was killed on the south side or the west side, we might not have talked about it. So I just felt like we needed to sit down and have a real conversation about what our youth are going through. What are some of the things that are pushing them to be so violent? What are some of the things we can do? And just how do we resolve this? Because what's the point of all the stuff we do if we can't leave it to our youth? So if our youth are dying before they even have a chance to become adults, what are we doing? You get my point on that, y'all? So I just wanted to hear you guys' perspective on it. And I especially wanted to hear from a youth. So if you don't mind, Kenidee, let's start off with you. Let's talk about some of the things you see your peers going through and some of the resources you see y'all lacking. and how you think that's leading to the violence we see every day.
Most definitely. For me, especially in this pandemic right now, everything has increasingly gotten kind of worse. Prior to, I'm not even going to sit here and say like I know firsthand the struggle that other people have to go through, because I've been blessed and I'm fortunate enough to not have to see it firsthand. But I do know some of my peers, people that I went to school with at elementary and middle school, of course, they don't get a chance to make it to C18, because you have to make the conscious decision of, do I go to school? Do I stay in school? Do I play sports? Or do I go out here and try to figure out what I'm about to eat tomorrow? Or do I go out here and figure out how my family finna get groceries for the week, or how my mama finna pay the rent, how my mama finna pay the light bill? So it's just choices that teenagers have to make. And even now during the pandemic, your parents are out of work. We are barely in school virtual. So it's just a lot more time for you to be able to, a lot more time for people to really sit in their thoughts and be like, okay, well, money not coming in. So what am I going to do? Either I'm going to sit here, because school is virtual. It's, you literally could just click on the Zoom and get on school. It's not really any, it's no teacher and student interaction for real. So really, if I was a student who was going through a financial situation, or I knew I either I sit on Zoom for an hour, or I can go out here and make some check in the streets for an hour and get some money so my family can eat for the rest of the week. So I think with making that conscious decision, a lot of people are put in predicaments that are, of course, not to their best interest. I mean, we all know that, but being a teenager, you're doing what you need to do in the moment to really survive. It's just the language of survival for me. But even,
I don't mean to interrupt you, but something people forget is when programs are taken away and when you don't have resources, the street's still there. So it ain't like the streets ain't got any more quiet. Like the streets still relevant, they right there in front of you. So again, going back to what you're saying, if you over here thinking about how you gonna eat and what you gonna shape, that ain't went nowhere.
Right, exactly. Even for me, I made a decision to not stay in my mother's house. I moved with my grandma just simply because I knew if I stayed in my mom's house, my mom would have drifted on survival versus staying and having tunnel vision on what I needed to do. So a lot of people they can't go to their grandma's house, because with most people's grandparents, that's your house where you go and do what you want to do, because your grandma is not really, it's not the same. I don't want to say it's not the same type of parenting, but in a sense it's not. But back to what I was saying first, I think it has increasingly gotten worse simply because we do have a lot more time in the house. We aren't around most of our friends all the time. It's just life has gotten a lot more real for all of us in a sense. And as far as work, like nobody wants, let's be real, minimum wage is $7.25. You work at McDonald's, that's $7.25. Of course, the more hours you work, the more money you get. But who is about to be working 60 hours for a $220 check at the end of the 2 weeks? And as soon as you pay some bills or something, as soon as you eat, that's right out the window for a family of 4. So I just feel like the opportunities are not necessarily there. And really just the care and concern for youth and what we really have to go through on a daily basis is not there either. I think a lot of adults really are seeing the world through their eyes and the struggle that they have to go through versus how it affects the teenagers and the children up under them. So even for
if you don't mind, can I pause you right there? I just want to ask them, as 2 adults listening to a teenager say that, how did that just make you feel? Like listening to her and talking about the things she's addressing, like the reality she's talking about. How does that make you feel right now?
I mean, for me, that makes sense because I understand, when we talk about it, a lot of the violence that we have going on is a direct result of not feeling like your life can go anywhere. You know what I mean? You look around you and what's the possibility? Minimum wage job, all right. So there's a sociologist called Emile Durkheim, his name. He lived in the late 1800s. He was French. He did a study on suicide. And there's 4 types of suicide. But one of them is when you feel that there's no way for self-actualization. There's no way for your hopes and dreams to actually happen. And, we've all been in the streets enough to talk to these kids. What do you hear? Man, life ain't work for me. I don't give a fuck. Life ain't work out for me. Ain't shit going on for me. Fuck it. Right? So when you look around the world and you look at your life and there's no way for you to achieve what you hope to achieve, there's no way, right? We see it all around us all the time. Exactly what she's saying. That leads to self-destructive behavior, whether you internalize that or you send it outwards. That's what's happening. The key to overcoming this is social bonds, strong social bonds. is the communities that had strong social bonds were able to overcome this. But then what are we into now? For a long time, I mean, you remember Jesse Jackson? Y'all are young, but when we were teenagers, Keith, you might remember this. Remember when Jesse Jackson made that speech, how scared he was when he saw young black men around?
Oh, yeah.
Remember that talk?
Mm-hmm.
So how can we have strong social bonds when the adults are literally
afraid of your own people? I didn't mean to cut you off, but yeah.
Afraid of the kids. We can't have the things we need to have. You know, when my mother grew up in Trinidad, she told me, if you got in trouble in school, you got in trouble all the way home. Everyone got at you. Everyone got at you. If you was an adult in that community, you had the right to get at anyone's kid for acting up. You know what I'm saying? And that's how things kept together. We don't have that anymore. So you combine that with you combine the fact that our adults are afraid to talk to these kids, and because the kids act up. I've seen a bunch of videos where the kids are beating up adults when the adults try and say something to them, and then you couple that with, where's life going to go? What am I going to do with $7 an hour? What am I going to do? Like, all right, well, and those things clash together before we even get into the next level of this, of just what the abuse and neglect of the system does to the brain itself. So there's a lot of things going on here, man. There's a lot of things going on here.
Before we move over to the next topic, I just want to let Ivan, if he had a comment, but it looked like he probably got a call.
No. I'm here.
Okay.
Can you continue?
Yeah.
All right. No, I mean, I definitely agree with it. I think that especially when you start talking about out of 10, let's say 20 to 30-year-old adults, or 30 to 40, or you pick an age group, how many of those have interactions with 2 to 3 individuals that are in that 12 to 18 range? And I think that number is extremely low. You don't have a certain level of mentorship or a certain level of community. I think a lot of that is tied to gentrification or the stratification of society right now. You have this huge wealth gap widening, right? And I think that when you think about, you hear it a lot, like right now with the water boys, right? Somebody will try to roll down their window and they'll try to give $1, and then it's like 10 other kids will run up. But if you know all 10 of them kids by name, right, you understand that that's not necessarily a dangerous situation. If it's dangerous for anybody, it's dangerous for them, because you have 10 kids out here running around amongst all this traffic. But I think that a lot of people who are either not familiar with the water boy kind of culture, if you will, or seeing kids run up to you, right? A lot of times I've heard people say that, oh yeah, I gave one time and then it was a whole scuffle outside my car window for this and the third. And people are turned off from that. People don't identify with that because they don't know names. They can't put faces to something that they can familiarize themselves with. And whenever there's this element of danger and no internal association as to how you guys are connected, and there's not that love or that understanding of mutual impact, meaning that the worse you treat this one individual ultimately is going to impact how your community looks overall. I think that's where you get this huge separation in terms of something that it sounds like Jesse Jackson might have said along the lines of being terrified of your own people, because that's your younger brother. That was you 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. So yes, I agree. I get it.
So Portia, real quickly, I'm sending you over a picture of a video of interaction with some water boys here in Atlanta, because I want our viewers to be able to see what he's talking about when he says that. When this video comes through, if you don't mind, if you could just pause for a second and just play that. But I completely agree with everything y'all are saying. I know myself, when I first started selling drugs, I'm out here on the block. The same folks who grew up watching me as a kid are riding by, watching me out here on the block, right? But nobody stopped and had a conversation with me. I bought my first house when I was 16 years old because I was homeless as a kid. My family moved out of town and I had to eat. Same thing Kennedy's saying. I'm worried about how I'm gonna pay a mortgage when I'm in the 9th grade. It's my 2nd year in the 9th grade, but still in the 9th grade. My teachers told me they used to pray for me in the mornings because everybody know I'm hustling, so they know I'm out here doing what I gotta do. But think about that as a kid. Like Director Ed said, I grew up feeling like, man, I'm eventually gonna die out here in the streets, but before I die, I gotta live. You gotta eat before you die, right? So at the end of the day, you out here trying to figure it all out with no guidance. Even like you said, Ivan, even if we do have relationships with the youth, are those relationships focused on what the youth needs or what we want to give to the youth? It's a big difference between mentoring somebody and having a relationship the way you get to know their direct needs and you address them as a human who needs this. Kenidee, you were saying earlier that you don't feel like a lot of times we as adults are hearing you because we're so focused on our situations. But a lot of times when we mentor and we try to tell youth what they need, that's the way in which we're doing it. We're trying to tell them what they need to do. Like we know automatically what's going on in your life. And a lot of the stuff they facing is not the stuff we face. So it's like until we sit down and we hear them, how can we really guide a person and move with a person if we're not hearing that person? So I want to go back with that, Kenidee, and pick back up on what you were saying. I just want to get their perspective on some of your thoughts.
Exactly. So for me, I think I've, even within these 9 months where I've kind of been in the house, I've really taken the time to examine why adults think the way that they do and how the situations that we're going through now economically in society, how I'm perceiving it as a teenager and how adults perceive it. Because I feel like once I understand how they're thinking, I can understand how their thinking influence my thinking, if that makes sense. Yeah. So whether it comes to finances, money, bills, things like that, I don't think parents and adults in general, I don't think you understand the subconscious stress that puts on a teenager, right? So somebody my age, well, 16 to 18, because once you turn 16, it's kind of like your parents are like, all right, well, you're 16 now, you can get a job. So let's go, let's get the ball rolling. You can get you a job, come on, let's do that. So once I turned 16, I got my first job. And then now you still have to hear about the struggle. You still have to hear about your parents, how they're barely making ends meet. You still ask your mom for stuff, she can't get it for you. So it's kind of like, I know I can't do as much as this household needs, but I'm still trying, knowing that I can't. So it's kind of like I'm trying to fulfill a goal that's unfulfillable for me within my means right now. So the stress that puts on you.
If you don't mind, I want to pause you while you're saying certain things because you say key things that I want to address. The first drug I sold because my mom used to get beat up by my dad, right? So since my dad was the breadwinner, I felt like if I'm getting money, I can get that money directly to my mom. She ain't got to take this ass whooping to get this money, right? So the first drug I sold exactly was what you said. That was me trying to address a need in my household because if you being controlled by this person's money, what does that mean? You got to deal with whatever they give you. So me growing up watching this man beat on my mama my whole life, as soon as I can get out here and hit the streets and make my own money, I'm gonna do that. I got a video I want to play real quickly. Portia, can you go ahead and play this video?
Boy, ain't no fucking way, boy. This nigga is standing on the bed. Look at these savages. No! Look at these savages. Only in Atlanta. Boy, no way, boy.
Okay, you can go ahead and end the video. Now, the reason why I want to show that, why do you think somebody is going to be outside running up the cars trying to sell water with that level of desperation? You ain't doing that to buy shoes. You ain't doing that because it's cool. You ain't doing that because it's fun to be outside while it's super cold or super hot in the middle of the street for 8, 9, 10 hours at a time, carrying heavy jugs of water. You get what I'm saying? They carrying 24 packs of water in that corner.
Here's the key. He said only in Atlanta. That's not only in Atlanta. You know where else I saw people doing stuff like that? Jaipur, India, and in the streets of Jamaica. That is third world country activity. That's where America's at right now. You got kids in the streets like it's and Argentina.
And you know what made me so mad? You know why they were heated? Because they up in Buckhead. They mad because they disrupted. We not mad because they situation. We not mad because why our kids got to be living like a third world situation. We mad because they disrupted us.
In America, in Atlanta.
Yeah, exactly.
Richest country in the world. And a city that everyone loved to talk about how much of it they own and how much money they got in it. Right. Kids are doing the same things I see them doing in India.
And this is the thing, they not doing that for fun. You're not holding on to a car because it's cool. You're
trying to not be in the streets.
Desperate. My fault. You were finna say something, Ivan. I cut you off, brother. Okay.
No, I think Kenidee was still.
Okay.
I think I wanted to just touch on one thing Mr. Director X, you mentioned kind of like mentoring and then love and then also kind of a meditation piece. But I think for me, even though I made that transition from public school to private school, the demographic in which I went to school was still completely different. All my administration was white, but all the students were black. So like the inferiority complex that was going through was kind of like we were like little worker bees, if that makes sense. So even within the school, we were my mom didn't pay for me to go to the school. She paid like $200 a year for me to go. But in order for me to pay for my tuition, I worked like an internship, a job. And all of the partners that partner with the school, they would put our face on like a piece of paper, say, you know, it's impoverished youth or, you know, Black kids in need or low income students. And then they would, of course, hire us and we would work throughout the year to pay our tuition to go to school. But even dealing with that, like you guys were talking about, kind of how Black people or people in general are scared of the youth, how they don't necessarily want to extend their hand because it makes them uncomfortable. I realized at that school I had to put on this facade or an appearance that was digestible for everybody else. So me, I like to wear nails, I like to wear long hair, I like to wear lashes. I couldn't wear none of it because it was distasteful for the people who I was presenting myself to. So with that, was it progressive? Not at all, because not only did it diminish how I felt about myself and how I perceived me and my identity and my culture, just to gain some type of monetary value or an opportunity that I really feel like I could have gotten elsewhere. But in that moment, I had to fit myself in this specific mode to do what I had to do for somebody else who did not really have my best interest at heart, and how it was kind of counterintuitive for me in the end. Because now that I look at it in moment, was I being put in $1 million firms? I was talking to old white men who were like millionaires who were, you know, helping me in certain ways. But at the end of the day, I don't talk to them now. They aren't my mentors. They aren't pouring into me now. They aren't helping me get into college. They aren't helping me get any access to the opportunities that they have. So as far as mentors, the only people I can say who are continuously pouring into me are the Black people who were able to look beyond who I was on the outside. Because on the outside, I was still trying to figure I still am in high school trying to figure myself out, trying to learn different things, still trying to just figure a lot of things out in society right now. So the mentors who really have had the biggest impact on my life were able to go deeper than the surface, really get in touch with what I was going through as an individual, my family, how my family impacted me. They were able to move beyond the numbers, because the academic mentors, I'm not too fond of them, because they really just looking at what's on a piece of paper versus what's in my heart, what's in my mind, and what's in my soul. So the people who really have impacted me the most, who are responsible for who I am becoming, are people who really looked at my heart, who looked at who Kenidee was as a person, as an individual, versus how I talked, how I looked, what kind of grades I got, how I spoke at school, how many mentorship opportunities I got. Just people who really showed a different level of care and concern for me that I wasn't getting in the household with a dad, that I really wasn't getting from a mom. It was just something different. I really don't know how to put a name on it, but it was just something different. And I feel like when you know, if that makes sense.
One thing about it is this cultural connection. Like when people
cultural
come and bond, and we've been through similar situations, we can attach to each other in a different way because we understand each other's struggles and how those struggles impact us. Now, I got some comments to what you said, but I want to let the gentleman respond first, because I want to see you guys' perspectives also. Do y'all have any comments or any thoughts or responses on some of the things she just said?
I mean, I think I definitely appreciate the journey that Kenidee is basically speaking to. And once again, definitely excited for all the things you have going on. Sounds like you got a lot of this stuff together to be in your senior year of high school. I think that right now, when we had this conversation around youth violence and looking at what is created because we don't dream bigger or don't have the vision. I don't know what part of the Bible it's in. It says, my people perish due to lack of vision, right? And I think that when we think about who it is we feel like we can learn from, sometimes I do think that we have too narrow of a lens. I think that when we think about what are Black people known for, when we think about music, entertainment, we think about athletics, we are going to have to step outside of what has traditionally been who we've been, or how it is we see ourselves, how it is we're continuously trained to see ourselves. That's why films and stories such as Black Panther, where you see Black technologists, or the Christmas movie, where you see Black mathematicians. And I think expanding that and being comfortable with, hey, look, these people are completely different from who it is that I am. However, they care. And I think that even beyond that level of us being from the same place, there's a level of, do you see who I am, right? And even if you don't understand fully who that is, do you have a level of love that is going to be there always? And I think that people who are consistent, and I think that to me is the biggest level or biggest expression of love. Are you consistent in terms of how you're showing up for these kids? Because I feel like you can go into different environments, right? And it's not necessarily that they are looking for a war horror story, right? Are you exactly how I came up? You exactly this, you exactly that. It's like, who are you to me right now? And moving forward, right? How much do you care about where I go in terms of my overall trajectory? And with all that being said, I think that when we start talking about youth violence, right, it's kind of like, what is the slowest way to drown? Because I think that if our youth are focused on the music and the things that we do buy into, the things that our culture are, some of the loudest voices in our culture are tied to violence, tied to murder, and we've tied our value system to a lot of things that are I don't want to use the term hyper masculine, but at the same time, like things that are not aligned with what we want to actually create as a society. And I think that when we have conversations around how do we make sure that youth violence is not a thing, I think we have to have a larger conversation around what are we focused on and where are we getting our value systems from. And when you start thinking about what is the importance of a family unit, how do we see ourselves? I think that all of those conversations do need to be had across the board. And once again, obviously, we need to support our own, and I definitely do appreciate that. But I do think that as I've gotten older, there came a point as an entrepreneur, the people who I grew up with created certain situations for their lives, and they were not able to guide me into a different level of financial awareness or how to run a business at a certain level. Because until you graduate to a different set of mentors or able to see past necessarily, hey, you're exactly who I feel comfortable with, and really connect on, hey, who are you and who am I as a person? How can I learn from this, that, and the third to create what I want? I think that's something that we also have to open the conversation up to, learning from different sources to create values.
I just want to throw a couple of thoughts out, and I'm going to shift over to direct ads. Understand the experience Kenidee had was a very unique one. The average Black child who's growing up in poverty in the inner city doesn't travel more than 15 miles outside of their own community. That's one thing, right? The next thing is we're talking about people who are facing scarcity. Kenidee has 2 households which she can live inside of. So like she said, she's not exactly the person. Hold on one second. Let me finish. Like I just listened to you. She's not the exact person who is challenged to say, where am I going to eat at today? Where am I going to sleep at today? And how am I going to stay warm? And how am I going to stay inside of, shelter? So I think that those are perspectives we had to look at. Also, a lot of these things aren't just that somebody's not choosing to take an outside opportunity or somebody's not choosing certain things. It's scarcity. Like scarcity breeds violence because you are hungry. You don't know where you're going tonight. When you're inside of a home, that parent may be doing drugs inside that home. So you're trying to find a way to get out that home as quick as possible because there's so much toxicness in that home. So I want to address some of the real life realities also because it's leading to some of the actions. Hold on one second. I want to let Director X comment, but I do want to hear you, but I just want to be fair and let everybody speak.
So what I want to talk about is the science of what's going on here. So the violent and aggressive brain, when they've looked at it, it has 2 major differences in the average brain. The prefrontal cortex, which is the part of the brain that is decision making, and the amygdala, which is the part of the brain that is emotional control. The person who is violent and aggressive or more prone to violent and aggressive behavior, their prefrontal cortex is small. It's smaller than the average. Their amygdala is larger than the average. So how do you get to be in a place where your brain is like that? Childhood abuse and neglect affect how the brain develops. When you read the papers, they call it brain damage. But regardless, it affects how the brain develops. Children that are abused and neglected, their prefrontal cortex is too small, their amygdala is too big. Also, stress. Stress changes the brain. Stress shrinks your prefrontal cortex and enlarges your amygdala. So there's a very clear line that we can all understand. Children that are abused, children are neglected, children or adults that grow up in stressful environments
And
I'm more
also
prone
add the compound trauma to that too. When you go to a child who's growing up in poverty and you look at the compound traumas and how that affects the things in which you're speaking of.
it's all trauma. Being abused and being neglected are traumatic. The stress, what stresses you out, if you can't walk to school without fearing for your life, if the other neighborhood is trying to kill you, if you going home might mean getting beat, all these realities that happen, or stress that change the brain, all of it making you more prone to violent and aggressive behavior, because that's a survival. You need to be ready. You need to. It could go down at any time. So the brain is like, it could go down at any time, baby.
My dad gave me a gun at 11 years old, took me outside, taught me how to shoot, and he was like, "You in the hood, like this your gun. Be responsible with it." I mean, 11 years old. But my mom shot somebody who broke in our house when I was younger than that, and somebody else got shot in my front yard by the police after they had robbed the store. So you could say, how irresponsible is that to give an 11-year-old child a gun, right? 2 people have been killed in my house before that. So my dad like, you gonna be here by yourself. You in the hood.
So what has that done? What you don't realize is that this not only that's affecting how your brain is developing, and then as an even adult, everyone in the household their brain is being shaped by that event. So meditation changes the brain as well. Meditation gives volume to the prefrontal cortex and shrinks your amygdala. The exact opposite of abuse, neglect, and stress. As well, exercise. Meditation and exercise have the best effect at reversing the effects of trauma when you do them together. So there is something that we can do that doesn't cost any money, that can begin to repair the damage done to the brain of being forced into this living situation, whether that's in your home, whether that's your environment, a combination of them all. These are things that we can do. That's what Operation Prefrontal Cortex is all about. So this is a solution we can harness that we don't have to ask anybody for. We just have to teach these kids how to meditate and take a walk. Even a walk in the morning will do something for you. You know what I'm saying? Some form of exercise.
Right? We got to first care about the kids. We got to second see the kids. We got to third attach to the kids. We got to fourth commit to spending some damn time with the kids.
Yes. It's a lot easier said than done, but this gives us something that we can do. Because to tell you a story, the most violent prison in Mexico had a riot that killed 44 people. One event. The guards and the prisoners started meditating. They haven't had extreme violence since. I have a TEDx that really breaks all this down. It's called Message to the Man Who Shot Me. If you put in Director X, Message to the Man Who Shot Me on YouTube, it'll come up. It's a TEDx, or you just go to our website, op-pfc.com. It's up there too. And you can read this thing. And there's a middle school in San Francisco. They started meditating. It was a middle school in one of the most violent neighborhoods. 3 dead bodies on the playground one night. All the madness of the hood. They started meditating. The violence dropped drastically. Suspensions dropped drastically. The same kids that the teachers were afraid of became top performing students. So not only does meditation reverse and repair the damage of this trauma, but once the kids get past that, their entire lives begin to change. Their academic performance, their friendships, everything changes. So the key for us, because we know we're not going to be able to tell the adults be nice, you know what I'm saying? We know these are long haul things for our community to come back together and provide the social bonds that they need. So this is something we can put in the hands of the children themselves. There's a program that started in Jersey called Meditation Mentors that was inspired by that same TEDx. It's changed the lives of these kids, man. And they're out there teaching this to other schools, middle schools, to other kids. This is something that we can do that realistically helps the kids in the streets, that people can just incorporate into the work they're already doing. You know what I mean? So this is life-changing stuff that we can begin to introduce that can really make a difference to what's going on here. This is like I said, this is the science of what's going on and the science of how we can repair it.
I just want to speak to some of what you're saying. What we do, the basis of what we do, making the transition, is we provide core programs to low-income communities through schools, courts, correctional facilities, different places, low-income housing communities. but we do like behavioral health from a standpoint of helping people understand their emotions, helping people understand, become cognitively aware of the different things that are going on in their life, solution focused therapy, things of that nature. So when he's saying it's something you can incorporate into it, it would be like just incorporating one activity inside a full set of your programs. It's just adding one more tool to where the child can have control of that tool for themselves. Like with our program, I mean, our programs are administered and given by somebody, but the child should have a tool that they can use themselves. Like I just spoke with a young man who's a teacher at pretty much all Black school in a low income community. They have 90% of their students who are close to failing because they just have a hard time transitioning over to Zoom. I speak to the staff is going off, they mad, they talking about how the parents are snapping, all these different things. I tell them we're in a I'm on the school board for a school here. We have the lowest income poverty, central poverty school in the East Coast. 90% of our students graduate with a scholarship to go to college. The biggest difference that we do, we talk to our students. We have committees like what Kenidee does, where our students can let us know what they're going through. We have a whole staff that's dedicated to communicating with parents, and we let the students have authority over letting us know what they need. And you got one school, 90% of failing students, got another school with a similar population, and has 90% of students graduating with a scholarship. It makes a huge difference when you understand the student in front of you and when you listen to them. It makes a huge difference. Ivan, I cut you off earlier when you were about to respond to what I was saying. I'm not in disagreement with you, but I feel like we have to make sure that we're always remembering the situation in front of the child. You know what I mean? Like a lot of times, we look at it and think that children have a lot more options in what they do. Let's say Kenidee didn't have a grandparent, right? Let's say Kenedee's mother didn't know anything about a program to get her into a school that took her into a different community. Kenedee's life would be directly impacted if you have a different circumstance, and it will be to where that was outside of her control. These were things, Kenedee's made great choices with options. But if you erase the options, what choices could she have made?
Right.
I think it's important. And outside of Kenedee's situation entirely, all I'm saying is that in terms of holistically, what do we need to make sure that we're providing as adults or as individuals of certain levels of influence, making sure that we are providing perspective so kids in certain situations that don't have options do, or at least are close enough to.
Right, when you're saying providing perspective, right? If you got a child who's in the projects, they have not made it out of the projects. I mean, like literally they grocery shop at a corner store, right? The furthest they get out of the projects is their school. What perspective exactly do we provide to a child who, I remember getting locked up, leaving out of Fulton County when we crossed the Bankhead Highway is Veterans Memorial on one side, that's Cobb County, is, you know, Atlanta, Fulton County on Bankhead. When you cross over that little hill to go into Cobb County, the police pulled me over and they told me they locking me up because they want my buddies to know, don't cross this hill. Stay on your side with your projects. You know what I'm saying? It was a Publix in Cobb County. So we try to sneak to the Publix, literally try to sneak to the Publix to get groceries because it's the only thing with fresh food, right? They lock you up because they know you from the projects. So what perspective do you provide to a person who can't leave out the hood? Like literally when you leave out the hood, you risk your freedom. They wrote on the ticket when they arrested me that they pulled me over because my tread was too low on my tires. How do you see that while I'm driving by, for one? But two, I had a car, my tires still had the sticker on them. You know, when you buy it like white letter tires, how they had a sticker on them and they still got the little color on the white letter? They were brand new tires. And they pulled me over for my tread being too low and locked me up for that. Because I came out of Fulton County because they don't want us on that side of the hill. So I'm just saying that to say, when you look at perspective, a lot of our kids do not have an opportunity waiting on them.
No, I heard you. And what I'm saying is that I think that as individuals, once again, of influence or do have that, it is your opportunity and your responsibility to a certain extent, as much as you want to pick it up, to provide that perspective. For example, with me, some things that I do for individuals that are from here or are in this community, I long story short, there are certain programs where like, hey, come out here and we'll work for a day, right? I'll show you how to get down with an electrician. What does an HVAC man do? What does a plumber do? And spend the majority of the day educating them as opposed to just, hey, go to work for this $7.25 or this $10 an hour, right? No, I'm gonna teach you about real estate investing. How much you think this costs? And what I'm saying is through those conversations, right, you're expanding their horizons by having different kind of conversations. And yeah, you do have to be in the hood sometimes to be able to have that conversation, to have that reach. But the whole point being, I'm saying that individuals who have need to do. Everybody needs to be responsible for reaching back for whatever it is that they have. And I think that a lot of people don't. And what I'm saying is a lot of times people come from the hood, they make it, they go to the suburbs and they get lost. They stay there, right? There's no programs going back. There's no bread going back. There's no anything. You know what I'm saying? Even if you're just doing stuff on Instagram or on Facebook, even though that's not the most effective means, you're still doing something. And I think a lot of times people just are so focused on them, they don't remember to do anything.
So
That's
Ken, I want to get back to you. I remember they asked me to come speak at a visual in the West End here in Atlanta. Do y'all remember when the store owner had got killed by 3 teenagers and they robbed him for under $45, right? So they robbed this man under $45, kill him in the store. They split it in 3 ways, so that's $15 a person, right? So I had another center at the time where we worked with the Department of Corrections at the end of the street. So like I'm like a presence in that community. So the community asked me to come speak at the visual. And while I'm speaking at the visual, something hit me. I remember them boys being in that parking lot asking, could they cut grass? Could they take out trash? You know what I'm saying? Could they just do something so they can earn some kind of cash money to eat every day, right? These boys grew up in that neighborhood. So the community watched them transition into being homeless and watched them go into a state of desperation. Nobody would let them do any activities. Nobody. Like Director Ed said, community scared of them, right? And when I spoke at the visual, I let the community know, y'all killed the man inside the store. Because if y'all had reached out and connected with these homeless kids who were that level of desperate, we could have curbed that completely. But I want to go back to you, Kenny. I just want to put, like Ivan said, I want to put the responsibility on us who have opportunity and we made, in some kind of way, we made it. And if that just means that you made it in your mind to know how to function inside of your own reality, teach your kids that. You don't have to have wealth. You don't have to own a business. If you just found some level of understanding, give that understanding to the next person so they can have some level of peace. Because going back to what Director Ed said, when you have no peace, you're going to automatically have chaos. Chaos is going to breed something that is not going to be positive.
Right. I was just going to touch on how, and thank you, Mr. Evan, for mentioning basically if you know better, you just have the obligation to do better. And I know for me, even though I don't consider myself to have made it yet, even with a certain level of mental elevation and mental enlightenment, of course, it is still my responsibility to help the next person who is going through similar circumstances know how to deal with stress, know how to deal with anxiety, how to deal with depression, how to just create some type of mental shift to where your reality is not necessarily negative, but you can turn it, you can really shift your perspective and kind of work through your certain circumstances and know that it's all benefiting you in some way, form, or fashion. So I do definitely understand how the responsibility does. And I carry the burden with pride, honestly. So if I know better, I know I'm obligated to do better. Any space that I'm in, I'm always going to be putting on for other people, to be honest. Just going in there, making a name for myself so I can eventually bring people up with me. And that'll always be my goal, whether I'm coming from my neighborhood to private school. To the more I elevate, other people behind me are going to elevate as well. So I definitely believe in also the different perspective part of that, because even transitioning into different arenas and different areas, I feel like it's important to be exposed to people who know more and people who know different things outside of your normal. So even when you're in the hood or you trying to figure out like the struggle, in a sense, what I was talking about before with BSU, just kind of like a safe haven or a safe space where you don't really have to think about your reality as much. You don't have to hone in on it. But I feel like if you're surrounded by people who are, you're just learning something new for a day. So electricity, you're just working in the day with them, or you're just learning different things outside of your normal to kind of, I don't want to say distract your brain, but kind of, distract your brain from your current circumstances and how it can create that type of stress and how it just creates that trauma over and over again, especially when you kind of get in these thought cycles to where you're just kind of like, what is going on? My reality will never change. How do I get out of this? And it's kind of like a downward spiral. And Director X, I want to touch on something you were talking about with the meditation. I know for a fact this quarantine, I've gotten so deep into just kind of figuring out the way that the mind works and the brain functions, because even at the end of my junior year, I went through probably the the deepest depression I had ever experienced. And even throughout quarantine, because you're sitting and you don't really understand why your circumstances are your circumstances. You're surrounded by a lot of things that kind of invalidate your feelings, so you really don't know. But I started to read this book called The Energy Codes, and by Dr. Sue Morter, and I really just kind of started to rethink a lot of my thoughts, rethink my circumstances, see why my perspective was the way that it was. I started to realize a lot of things with my perception. I wasn't really taking all my experiences and looking at it as if it was all a part of my life process. It was all a part of something that I just had to go through. And as far as the meditation aspect and just breathing exercises, things that are so simple that can relieve stress, like in that moment, relieve an anxiety attack, relieve kids from just overthinking, be so in your head, just having those anger outbursts in that moment. And I know a lot of people my age as well are starting to, you know, form deeper connections with God and with spirituality, and just being sitting in the house, you kind of, for me especially, and I know a lot of people around me my age, you're kind of thinking, well, I don't want to say since I'm bored and we just talk to God, but a lot of people are just kind of just trying to reach and find something bigger than yourself, I guess, if that makes sense. Reaching out, find something bigger than yourself, kind of trying to find your purpose. And in that, I think all of it has its different level of importance. But what I will say is the breathing and the mental health, all of that most definitely is number one for me right now.
So
And number
something
one
I'm
for my
hearing
peers.
everybody say, it's like
Mhm.
commonalities to me. First
Mhm.
is a sense of community and a sense of belonging. Like you gotta have something that you feel like you attached to, because if you don't feel like you attached to something, you automatically gonna get it pulled into other things. The second thing is just finding a way to have peace, which may take an external person to help you be able to find your internal peace, right? Like how you decided to read books. And something we haven't even addressed on is the influences that are impacting our kids, and what are we gonna do about what they're taking in? Because if you're taking in nothing but, you know, negative influences, all you hearing, like King Von being killed, people turned upside down and went through. I watched people go through more of an emotional experience with him dying than they did with family members who passed, right? But when you look at King Von and you look at his music and the stuff that he promoted, look at how much violence he promoted himself, right? So you got to look at growing up, man. I remember, like I said, my dad gave me my first gun when I was like 11. I had to come to a point where I put that gun down. My gun was my guide for a long time. I showered with my gun. If I went to sleep, the gun under the pillow, everything. I wouldn't go nowhere unless I could take the gun. I had the gun. As long as I kept the gun as a part of my reality and a part of how I felt like my life revolved, violence kept coming back to me. You know what I'm saying? Like me having a gun on me attracted violence to me. The energy you put out has a lot to do with the energy you take in. So if our kids are being promoted so much stuff with violence in it, violence is gonna be on the mind, and whatever's on the mind is gonna be the actions. So it's like we gotta go ahead.
I mean, it's a cycle there, right? It's like I'm saying about the brain. Look, poverty and violence go hand in hand, and that is like it's the reality of how the brain works and all these kinds of things. And then the music reflects that as well. And like Ivan was saying, when you get to this point in a society, hypermasculinity becomes a part of it. Look at even in the white community. On the flip side of it, these white kids, the Proud Boys, they go out and they just want to fight, and they're talking about manhood, masculinity being drowned out, and all these are this is what happens when in a society, honestly, in collapse. So this hypermasculinity is not new, and as opposed to I don't like even getting into that discussion because it's a waste of time. It's completely unrealistic. There's no way in the world hip hop artists are ever gonna stop talking about guns, violence, sex, and all this shit. Ever. So to have that discussion like that's an actual lane for us to expend energy on is ridiculous. It's not happening.
The part of it that I do think is discussion is impacting how much of one message they're hearing. Like
yes,
I don't
completely. Yeah, driving it into their brain, definitely to acknowledge that this is part of the thing that's going on. But the key around it, because I grew up in the suburbs. Hip hop and movies were not things speaking to me about shit I should do. They were entertainment. And maybe inside of me, I wish I could be a little more manly. But I was never going to go out. It wasn't part of my program. You know what I'm saying? So again, the key is, we know that's not changing. We know that's an element. It's the things that you're doing. It's community, mental health that is going to get our kids back where they can hear the music, go, oh, that's a guy kind of talking tough, and you know what I'm saying, living a little fantasy, but it's not seeping in the same way.
Look, I want to address what you're saying right now, and I want to let y'all close out because we're down to the last 5 minutes. I think something that a lot of people miss is something you just hit on that's key. When our kids are coming up in poverty and they're hopeless and they have very little representation, they have even less connection, right? They listen to this music and they idolize that person because they feel like this person cut from the same cloth as me. They come from the same thing as me. They made it by doing 1, 2, and 3, right? So you look at LeBron James and you look at, let's say, Jay-Z, and you look at them in business, and they revolutionize their industries on how you become an owner inside of your own industry, right? And you look at all of the people, athlete and artists who are following them and coming behind them, and they look at the trail that they blaze, and they look at that and say, oh, this is what I can do so that I can get more equity out of my time in this space, right? That's intelligent. If you see an athlete do some of the things that LeBron did to position himself, we're going to be proud of him. If you see an entertainer do some of the things that Jay-Z did, we're going to be proud of them. But these poor people who are growing up with very little exposure, and they're hearing these constant stories where they got 20 artists saying the same one message, they're trying to duplicate that. That's not entertainment for them. It's a pathway that they're trying to follow.
Yeah.
They have nothing else being poured into them. Now, I want to let y'all close out because we're down to the last 4 minutes, but that's critical that I think a lot of people watching this need to understand. It's a difference between being entertained and watching a TV show versus watching a documentary or listen to a podcast where you're trying to grow so that you can mimic those actions. When our kids are inundated with this music and they're listening to it at that high level, they're not listening just for entertainment. They listening because they're trying to get a code so that they can make it. And that's where the problem comes from. When they hear all the violence, they hear the stories, that becomes their code because it's not simply entertainment. But I want to let y'all close out. Kenidee, do you want to close out first or last?
I can be last.
Okay, so gentlemen, I'll let Ivan go because Ivan, I laughed earlier because you had a hand up. That was my bad. So I'm gonna let you go first, brother.
Real quick, I do have a question for Director X. In terms of meditation, just high level, did you have any like a slight prescription, what y'all recommend, or kind of what the science says everybody should do at a minimum?
Hey, Dr. S, did you hear him? I think he's frozen right now.
Maybe. Well, I'll go ahead and close my piece.
Okay, he's back. I just saw him come back in. Dr. S, he was asking you a question about meditation. If you had any, if you don't mind, can I set y'all up for a sidebar conversation?
Oh, we definitely will. Definitely hook that up. That's something I wanted to tell everybody. Is go to YouTube and Google and search guided meditation and find one that works for you. It's the easiest way, or download an app, Headspace, Calm. There's a bunch of apps. You're gonna have to do a little groundwork to get this going, but it's very simple. Guided meditation, Headspace, there's a bunch of, or just search meditation apps and it'll come up. So there's ways to do it. Like I said, and the magic combination is meditation and exercise can reverse the effects of trauma.
We're down to the last 2 minutes, so I just want to make sure everybody can close out, and I want to make sure that Kenidee gets let a solid word out because we got to start hearing arguments.
Give it to Kenidee.
All right, Kenidee, you get the whole 2 minutes for me.
Oh wow, thanks.
Let me do this. Can y'all drop y'all Instagrams real quick, and then we give Kenidee the rest of the time?
Yeah, mine's real easy. Director X.
Ivan _Gaskin.
Okay.
Mine is Kenidee Tierra. Okay, so I really don't want to say much. We only have 2 minutes anyway, but I just want to say thank you all for listening to me and my perspective. I would never ever try to speak for the entire youth because I know everybody's story is different. We all are different. But I do know that, like you guys mentioned before, with love, with care, we can do a lot of things to elevate our youth and continue to be progressive and to help us all go in the right direction. As far as meditation and exercise, I know the power of that and how it really can affect healing and progression for young people and reverse trauma. So I really do hope and pray that people can really look into that, even if it's like 2 minutes, because I know for a fact I can't sit still for over 10 minutes. So even if you just start by breathing for 2 minutes or exercising, walking, or something like that, every little thing matters. Again, thank you guys for your perspective. Thank you guys for sharing your stories. Thank you for listening to mine. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak like this on these types of platforms, and I appreciate the opportunity. So thank you.
Kenidee, don't think it's gonna be the first nor the last. Like, you are a queen, you got a lot to offer. These platforms are made for people like yourself. Everything that
Thank
we
you. I
do,
appreciate it.
every one of us, we doing it to lift you, right? And for every person out here, if you're not proud of a Kenidee, something wrong. And if you proud of her, understand this young lady had things poured into her. This is what our youth look like when people pour into them. When people come together and say, you know what, her mama was woman enough to say, I can't do it all by myself. So yeah, you can go to your grandma's house. Her grandma was woman enough to say, you know what, we want to give you some different exposure. So we're going to let you get mentors that may not even be of your culture. And then she was wise enough to say, my brothers and my dad, they made some decisions and they got some stuff going on that I don't want going on in my life.
Right.
But those are decisions. Those are people coming together. This is the outcome that you get when you get people working as a collective and caring. You get what I'm saying? Like, this is not something that is exclusive. It's not like Kenidee is the only bright Black young lady or the youth that we can produce. If we come together and we put in the time, we will get high quality young people, and they will go out here and they will take the whole culture forward. Any culture that cannot understand that youth is their future is not going to even survive. You got to have strong youth, because who is going to take you forward? So even on a selfish side, if you want to preserve, pour into your youth. Y'all got anything y'all want to say? We already over a minute, but it's cool if y'all want to close out. If y'all have anything, if not, I appreciate y'all so much, and we appreciate y'all for watching. But don't just watch. If you had time to watch, you got time to text a young person and just let them know you care. You got time to pull up on somebody. At the end of the day, man, our kids are dying. We have to take care of our kids. Ain't nobody coming to save us. We got to do that. I love y'all. Be blessed.